are you, students? This is grade 12 economics lesson provided by the Ministry of Education Ethiopia. The lesson is on Unit 7, which is about macroeconomic reforms in Ethiopia, and this is the first lesson. The first lesson is about national development objectives and strategies, historical review. At the end of this lesson, you will be able to evaluate performance of Ethiopian economy during the 3 5-year plans of the Imperial regime, distinguish national development plans of DRG and EPRDF, the Ethiopian People Revolutionary Democratic Front, differentiate national development plans of GTP1 and GTP2. When we see the history of Ethiopia, Ethiopia is the oldest independent country in Africa and one of the oldest countries in the world with different civilizations. And the ancient monarchy maintained its freedom from colonial rule with the exception of a short-lived Italian occupation effort from 1936 to 1941. And Ethiopia is well known in the victory of Adwa. In 1974, a military junta, the DRG, deposed Emperor Haile Selassie I and established a socialist state, and Ethiopia is one of the African countries that followed the communist economic system for 17 years during the DRG regime. Torn by bloody coups, uprising, widespread droughts, and massive immigration problems, the DRG regime was finally toppled in 1991 by a coalition of rebels called the Ethiopian People Revolutionary Democratic Front, EPRDF. And a constitution was adopted in 1994, and the Ethiopia's first multi-party election was held in 1995 in Ethiopia. The Ethiopian economy slaved for centuries without any national development plan until the enactment of the first 5-year national development plan of the Imperial regime. So, under this topic, we are going to see the national development plan objectives and strategies of different regimes in Ethiopia, more specifically, the national development plan and strategies of the Imperial regime, the national development plan and strategies of the DRG, the national development plan and the strategies of the EPRDF, and after the reform, the homegrown economic reform in this unit. Students, let's start with the national development plan during the Imperial regime, which started in the 1950 and ended in 74. During the late 1940s and the 1950s, much of the economy remained unchanged, and it was controlled by the feudal land tenure system. By the early 1950s, Emperor Haile Selassie I had renewed course for a transition from a subsistence economy to an agro-industrial economy. Agro-industrial economy means processing agricultural products or simply adding values on the agricultural products, and this is the agro-industrial economy. And in order to accomplish this task, the government launched 3 5-year national development plans called the first 5-year, the second 5-year, and the third 5-year national development plans. When we see the first 5-year national development plan, it started in 1957 and ended in 1961. The main objectives were development of strong infrastructure. The then existing infrastructure of Ethiopia was very weak. Hence, in order to increase or improve productivity or achieve economic growth, infrastructure is a base. So, government launched this first 5-year plan in order to construct infrastructures like highways, dams, and other basic infrastructures to improve the Ethiopian economy. The second objective was establishment of a cadre of skilled and semi-skilled personnel. One of the objectives of the first 5-year national development plan was transition of the predominantly agrarian Ethiopian economy to the agro-industrial one. So in order to shift from the agrarian economy to agro-industrial economy, it needs a skilled personnel that can work on these processing industries. So the second objective is establishing a cadre of or a school of skilled and semi-skilled personnel that can do on these processing industries. And the third objective is acceleration of agricultural development by promoting commercial agricultural ventures. After the plan period, when we see the achievement, the gross national product GNP increased at a rate of 3.2% per annum. It is not good achievement, 3.2%. And when we see the growth in economic sectors such as agriculture, manufacturing and mining failed to meet the national plan's target during this period, the exports increased by 3.5% only and the import increased by 6.4%. That means there is a gap between the values of the export and import. This was another headache or problem of this period economic performance. The second 5-year plan was launched in the year 1962 and ended in 1967. When we see the major objectives of the second 5-year national development plan of the imperial regime, it was to change Ethiopia's predominantly agricultural economy to an agro-industry alone, and diversification of production, introduction of modern processing methods, and expansion of the economy's productive capacity was the other objective of the second 5-year national development plan of the imperial regime. The third 5-year national development plan was launched in the year 1968 and ended in 1973. When we see the objectives, the first one is raising manufacturing and agro-industrial performance as the second and the first national development plan of the imperial regime. Again, raising manufacturing sector. The manufacturing is one of the components of the industrial sector of economy. So increasing productivity of this manufacturing sector is the objective of the third 5-year national development plan. Expansion of educational opportunities. Education gets attention for the first time in the national development plan in Ethiopia during the third 5-year national development plan of the imperial regime. Improvement in peasant agriculture, the smallholder farmer. This was another objective of the third 5-year national development plan of the imperial regime. When we see the second 5-year plan and the third 5-year plans, anticipated that the economy would grow at an annual rate of 4.3%. That means there was improvement from the first 5-year national development plan, and the third national development plan, the third 5-year national development plan of the imperial regime registered 6.0% of annual economic growth rate, which was a very good improvement in the Ethiopian economy during these plan periods. From 1961 to 1973-74, the economy achieved sustained economic growth, and between 1960 and 1970, Ethiopia enjoyed an annual average growth rate of 4% in per capita GDP. It was a good improvement during the plan period. Students, let's see the national development plan under the socialist period, which started in the year 1974 and 1991. The 1974 revolution by the DRG resulted in establishment of socialist state aimed at the nationalization and restructuring of the Ethiopian economy. Nationalization means putting those institutions which were owned by the private sector into the public, into the government, is called nationalization. So many nationalization measures taken by the DRG after the downfall of the imperial regime. For example, there were large-scale commercial farms which were owned by the private sector during the imperial regime, but DRG nationalized these private commercial farms into state farms. This was one of the nationalization measures taken by the DRG after the downfall of the imperial regime. And restructuring the Ethiopian economy was one of the policy measures taken by the DRG after the downfall of the imperial regime. DRG changed the previous national development strategy, placing the emphasis on a centrally planned economy. There was decentralization during the imperial regime, but DRG applied a centrally planned economy, which is a command economy. All the resources are collected in the central government, and the central government has the mandate to distribute all the resources all over the country and for all the sectors of the economy. This is a centrally planned economic system. The Derg National Development Plan revolved around industry-led development. Derg believed that the industrial sector can boost the development of Ethiopian economy, so it was more focused on the industrial sector of Ethiopian economy. And the rural land and other productive assets were nationalized. All the lands were nationalized by the government, and land was distributed among farmers. For the land was held by the farmers. During the Imperial regime, the land was owned by the feudals. So one of the policy measures taken by the Derg was giving the land for the tillers. And the other feature of the National Development Plan of the Derg was commercial farmers. Derg nationalized the privately owned commercial farmers, which were owned by the private sector during the Imperial regime, into the state farmers, and these were put under government control, and the land tenancy was abolished. One of the most important policy measures taken by the Derg was abolishing the land tenancy for the Ethiopian farmer. Private commercial laborers and commercial farming were marginalized, and large collectivization programs were promoted through resettlement and villagization programs. One of the policy measures taken by the Derg was forced villagization programs and resettlement programs. More specifically, people who were living in the drought-prone areas in the northern part of Ethiopia were resettled in the Oromia region and some southern regions and Benishangul Gumuz regions during the Derg regime. The other policy measures taken by the Derg was there was collectivization programs of the peasants, but these peasants were collected involuntarily. So involuntary collectivization of the peasants into peasant associations was one of the feature of the National Development Plan of the Derg. The economic planning and development in the post-revolution period had four distinct phases during the Derg regime. The first one is starting from 1974 to 1978. This was the first period of the Derg regime. And during this period, there was little economic growth, and this was mainly associated with unstable political climate. There was political instability due to different political parties that were engaged in the country's political system, and due to this economic displacement was occurred. Due to this, there was a loss of valuable human resources during the 1974 revolution in Ethiopia. So due to this unstable political climate, the Ethiopian economy registered lower economic growth during the first stage of the Derg regime. The other reason for the weak performance of the economy during this period was the military budget consumed the substantial portion of the nation's resources. Hence, it leads to lower economic performance. As a result of these problems, when we see the average growth rate of these years, it registered only 0.4%, which is the minimum economic growth rate during this period. When we come across to the second stage, it started from the year 1978 and ended in 1980. During these 3 years, the economy began to recover as the government consolidated power or restored its power and implemented institutional reforms. During this period, the government's new development through cooperation campaign, commonly referred to as Damecha, there was cooperation campaigns for education, for economy, for health, and others. These campaigns brought a change in Ethiopian economy during this period. For example, there was a Damecha called Edgat Lebret, which was an education Damecha, and most of the educated Ethiopians taught the Ethiopian farmers during for the 2 or 1 years during the 1970s in Ethiopian economy. This was one of the achievements of the Derg regime. And the gross domestic product grew at an average annual rate of 5.7%, which was a moderate increase in the real GDP during this period. It reveals that the economy started to grow. And the agricultural increased at an average annual rate of 3.6%. It's not as such good because of good weather, and manufacturing increased at an average annual rate of 8.9%. Relatively, the growth rate of the manufacturing sector is better than that of the agricultural sector during this period. The third phase is starting from the year 1980 to 1985. During this period, the economy experienced a setback as gross domestic product declined. When we see these phases, the first stage was characterized by lower economic performance due to political instability. Later, it grew, and then in the third phase, again, it starts to fall. During this period, the manufacturing took a downturn and the agriculture reached a crisis stage, and this is mainly associated with the following reasons. And the first one is widespread droughts all over the country, and these droughts resulted in a loss in the lives of for many Ethiopians and for many cattle in Ethiopia during the 1985, according to the Ethiopian calendar, the 1977 droughts. The other cause that is associated with the weak performance of the Ethiopian economy during this phase was manufacturing sector stagnated as agricultural inputs declined. Most of the Ethiopian manufacturing sector resources or raw materials are dependent on the agricultural sector. And due to the failure of the agricultural sector, the supplies of agricultural inputs for the manufacturing sector were lowered, and this resulted in the weak performance of the manufacturing subsector. Lack of foreign exchange and declining investment was the other cause for the weak performance of the Ethiopian economy during this phase, and high rise in defense expenditure. During this period, there was political instability, more specifically in the northern part of the country with the TPLF in Ethiopia. So this war or political instability weakened the economy during this period. The fourth phase was starting from the year 1985 to 1999. The fourth period was starting from the year 1985 to the year 1990. During this period, there was a 10-year perspective plan proposed by the Derg, but it survived only for 5 years. And due to strategies of the cooperativization during this period, cooperativization leads to good performance of the economy during this period, and establishment of state farms, the agricultural decline was reversed, and the manufacturing sector also grew during this period. Hence, the GDP increased at an average annual growth rate of 5%, which was a moderate increase during this period. And this increment in the real GDP was mainly associated with the cooperativization and expansion of state farms by the government. Students, now let's see the National Development Plan under FDRE, the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia. It moved Ethiopia's development vision away from the previous centrally planned industrial development and towards a new agricultural-led development approach. The agricultural development-led industrialization is a government-envisioned agricultural sector-driven economic transformation. The agricultural development-led industrialization indicates that we have to put priority for the development of the agricultural sector, because the agricultural sector is a means of livelihood for more than 85% of the total population. So by improving productivity of the agricultural sector, we can transform the economy to the industry. Again, the agricultural sector is a source of foreign exchange for more than 80% of the Ethiopian foreign exchange contribution. The agricultural sector is a source of raw material for more than 70% of the industrial sector. Hence, Increasing productivity of the agricultural sector means increasing productivity of the industrial sector. So we have to put priority for the development of the agricultural sector according to the agricultural development-led industrialization strategy. So the Ethiopian People Revolutionary Front, or the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia, in 1991 proposed this strategy called agricultural development-led industrialization to boost the economic performance of Ethiopia. The first plan of EPRDF, Ethiopian People Revolutionary Democratic Front, was Peace, Democracy and Development Program, which was launched in the year 1992 and ended 1996. And when we see the objectives of the program, poverty alleviation through rapid economic growth, ensuring peace and security. Peace and security is the basis for the development of every economy. In the absence of peace, it's difficult to bring change in an economy. So the EPRDF give priority for ensuring peace and security during this period. Implementation of an efficient educational system. Education is the basis for the development of every sector of the economy, including the agriculture, industry, service, hotel and tourism, trade. So education gives, the EPRDF gives attention for the development of education and implementation of a prevention-oriented healthcare system, not a curative. Prevention means before providing medicines for the patients, preventing the source or the causes of disease is a prevention-oriented healthcare system, which is good health care system, which was implemented by the EPRDF during this period. Students, now let's see the other development programs of the Ethiopian People Revolutionary Democratic Front, EPRDF. The first one is Sustainable Development and Poverty Reduction Program, SDPRP, started from the year 2002-3 to 2004-5, which was a 3-year national development plan, and this was part of the Millennium Development Goal. When we see the goals and concepts of the Sustainable Development and Poverty Reduction Program, SDPRP, the agricultural development-led industrialization was a goal, and food security, because Ethiopia suffered from food insecurity, so securing food is one of the goal of the SDPRP. Decentralization. The Derg government focused on centralized plan or planned economic system, but there is decentralization by the EPRDF. Decentralization means there is delegation of powers from the central or the federal government to regional governments or zonal governments. So decentralization is one of the goal of the SDPRP program of EPRDF, and empowerment is the other goal of EPRDF. Capacity building in both private and public sectors is the other goal of the SDPRP, and finally reforms in justice system and the civil service are the goals of SDPRP. The second national development plan is the Plan for Accelerated and Sustained Development to End Poverty, PASDEP, and it was launched in the year 2005-06 and ended in 2009-10. And when we see the main objectives of the Plan for Accelerated and Sustained Development to End Poverty, PASDEP, was to lay out the directions for the accelerated, sustained and people-oriented development and pave the groundwork for the attainment of the MDGs by 2015. The other objective of PASDEP was building modern and productive agricultural sector. So the new government or EPRDF gives attention for the productivity of the agricultural sector, because agriculture is the source or the basis or for the development of other sectors of the economy. To increase per capita income, based on these strategic pillars, two alternative economic growth scenarios were considered during this period. The best case scenario, this is the minimum threshold. We have to produce at least 70% of the GDP during these 5 plan periods. This is the best case scenario. But the highest case scenario, if it is possible, the economy should grow by 10%. This was the plan of the PASDEP. The third one is the Growth and Transformation Plan 1, GTP 1, which was started in the year 2010-11 and ended 2014-15. Advancing the Ethiopian national agenda towards becoming a lower middle income economy by 2025. A lower middle income economy is above a per capita income of above 955 USD. So in order to put the average Ethiopian annual income above $955, this was one of the objectives of the Growth and Transformation Plan of the EPRDF. So it promoted the production of high-valued crops rather than food crops. It promoted investment in labor-intensive micro and small-scale enterprise. There are two production techniques called labor-intensive and capital-intensive. The capital-intensive production technique is the use of more machineries and equipment than that of labor. But the labor-intensive production technique requires the use of more labor than that of the machineries and equipment. For countries like Ethiopia, with a cheap labor, the labor-intensive production technique is favorable because it creates more job opportunities for the economy. So the EPRDF under this plan targeted to promote investment on the labor-intensive production techniques under the micro and small scale enterprises. When we see the objectives of the Growth and Transformation Plan 1, GTP 1, an average real GDP growth rate of 11% per annum was the target. But when we see the achievement, it is 9.2%. But this was the period where the Ethiopian economy registered a robust growth. 11% per annum GDP growth rate is very advanced economic growth. Expanding access and ensuring the qualities of education and health was the objective. Establishing conditions for sustainable nation building. Nation building means building a country with a strong political power, with a strong economic power. This is called nation building. And ensuring the sustainability of growth is the other objectives of the GTP 1, Growth and Transformation Plan 1 in Ethiopia. The fourth one is Growth and Transformation Plan 2, GTP 2, which was launched in the year 2015-16 and ended in 2019-20. The overarching objective of GTP2 is to sustain the accelerated growth and establish a springboard for economic structural transformation, thereby realizing the national vision of becoming a lower middle income country by 2025. When we see the specific objectives of GTP2, achieving an annual average real growth GDP growth rate of 11% was the objective, and developing the domestic engineering and fabrication capacity. There were different metallurgical plants which were established during this period, like the METEC. Deepen the hegemony of developmental political economy by strengthening a stable democratic developmental state. Democratic developmental states is a theory which states that the states can lead the economy by investing in the economy. Students, now let me give you exercises. The first question is to achieve the immediate PASDEP plan for accelerated and sustained development to end poverty, aimed an average economic growth rate of A, 7% per annum as the high case scenario, B, 7% per annum as beyond achievement of immediate targets, C, a 10% annual average economic growth target was set as necessary, D, a 10% as the high case scenario. The second question, the following are true about Ethiopian economy during DERG except A. Restriction on movement of food grain, B. Abolition of forced food grain quota delivery, C. Involuntary collectivization of peasants into associations, D. Forced villagization and settlement. The third question is, the following are macroeconomic reform measures taken by EPRDF except A. Removal of agricultural price controls, B. Privatization of state farms, C. Import-oriented development strategy, D. Implemented structural adjustment programs or SAPs. The fourth question is, Ethiopia's second poverty reduction strategy covering the periods between 2005-06 and 2009-10 was A. PASDEP, Plan for Accelerated and Sustained Development to End Poverty, B. SDPRP, Sustained Development and Poverty Reduction Program, C. GTP-1, Growth and Transformation Plan 1, D. GTP-2, Growth and Transformation Plan 2. Welcome back, students. Now let's do the exercises together. The first question is to achieve the MDGs PASDEP aimed an average economic growth rate of 7% per annum as the high case scenario. No, A is not the answer because 7% per annum is the base case scenario. B, a 7% per annum as beyond achievement of MDGs targets. No. C, a 10% annual average economic growth target was set as necessary. Not, it is not necessary, but it is the high case scenario. So the answer is D, a 10% as the high case scenario. Question number 2. The following are true about Ethiopian economy during DERG except A. Restriction on movement of food grain. There was restriction on movement of food grain from one part of the country to the other during DERG. So A is not the answer because the question is except. Choice B, abolition of forced food grain quota delivery is the answer. There was forced food grain quota delivery during DERG. But the abolition of forced food grain quota delivery is a policy measure taken by the new government after the downfall of DERG. C, involuntary collectivization of peasants into associations was the feature of the agricultural sector policy and strategies of the DERG. And D, forced villagization and settlement was one of the policy measures taken by DERG in Ethiopian economy. Question number 3. The following are macroeconomic reform measures taken by EPRDF except A. Removal of agricultural price controls. Removal of agricultural price controls was one of the policy measures taken by the EPRDF. B. Privatization of state farms. One of the policy measures taken by the EPRDF was privatizing state farms which were owned by the government during DERG. C. Import-oriented development strategy is not the feature. So the feature or the characteristics or the policy measures taken by the EPRDF is export-oriented development strategy, not import. So the answer is C because the question is except. D. Implemented structural adjustment programs. One of the economic program that was taken by the EPRDF when it came into power was a structural adjustment program sponsored by the World Bank. The fourth question is Ethiopia's second poverty reduction strategy covering the periods between 2005-06 and 2009-10 was the PASDEP. A is the answer. Plan for Accelerated and Sustained Development to End Poverty was a plan of this period. Students, let's summarize the day's lesson. By the early 1950s, Emperor Haile Selassie I had renewed calls for a transition from a subsistence economy to an agro-industrial economy, and the government planned 3 5-year national development plans called the first 5-year, the second 5-year, and the third 5-year. The 1974 revolution by the Derg resulted in establishment of a socialist state aimed at the nationalization and restructuring of the Ethiopian economy. The Ethiopian People's Revolutionary Democratic Front (PASDEP's) rise to power in 1991 resulted in a shift in national development strategies. Students, this is all about the day's lesson. Thank you.